Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm David Noble. This is the 9 o'clock meeting. Joining me today we have Ash, and we're going to be going through the F1 season 2021. It's unusual actually. Normally if I have a guest on, I'll have an idea what I want to say to them beforehand, what we're going to discuss beforehand. But in this case it was sort of like, fancy a chat. And then we worked out afterwards. So, hello Ash.
Hi David, you alright?
I nearly managed to get through that without laughing. It's all good. Let's carry on.
Not that. It's fine.
We did.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, it's good to talk to you. Let's say what I said in the introduction, looking at the drivers and the teams in what order we think, more or less, they might finish in the championship this year. Because I seem to be the only person who hasn't done that yet. And with testing coming up, I thought it'd be a good subject to talk about. So, How do you think? We'll start off with the obvious one because we've both already decided who's going to be in 20th place, and that's a certain Russian Haas driver. So, no need to talk about him anymore. Basically, I think is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Nothing really to add.
Cool. Going through it, we'll do I think 3 sections because. Realistically, I think the bottom 3 teams are still going to be the bottom 3 teams. The midfield is still going to be huge. And the front of the grid is likely to be the front of the grid. So we'll discuss the rear of the grid first, then the midfield. We'll go through the drivers and then talk about why we think they're likely to end up where they are afterwards. And let's say we'll order the teams as well, maybe while we're going through it. Right, so starting off, you ready?
I'm ready. I've got a list for both. I've done teams and drivers. I've scribbled out multiple times, but I'm ready.
Well, yeah, there's certain parts to this list where it was like, I feel like if I'd have picked names out of a hat or I'd written them down, chucked them all up in the air and written them down in the order I picked them up, it might actually be more successful than what I've written down, but we'll see.
Yeah, I've never been successful at predictions, to be fair, either. Even when I've kind of researched heavily. And I've never, to be fair, I'm like you, I've never done a predictions, or I haven't done for this year, and I've never done one on the channel so far. So this has been the first time I've predicted anything for current F1. So I'll be interested to see how wrong this goes.
Yeah, we'll have to make a note of what we've got and keep tracks of it, and at the end of the season see who gets the most points for being correct or incorrect, as the case may be.
Yeah, we'll have to do a chain bear style revisiting of like the predictions. Yeah, I'm up for that. It's probably, I'm not confident, but I'm up for it.
It sounds a plan for a future video. We'll have to keep a mental note of that. Book it in for December.
I've got it written down as I'll be ready.
Cool. Right, starting off then. In 19th place, I have Nicholas Latifi.
I also have Nicholas Latifi, yes. And I don't know. I'm thinking the next couple drivers might diverge here, but I do think that while I don't dislike Latifi, I think he's a solid driver. I think he's just in that Williams, that driver-car combo. I think that's where he's probably going to end up.
Yeah. I'll discuss my reasons for it when we've come through this section a little bit, but it depends on factors, I think, a little bit almost out of the team's control as to who's going to finish where. In 18th, I have George Russell.
Right, this... okay, you saying that has immediately made me nervous because I have put in 18th Mick Schumacher.
Yeah. Well, he's who I've got in 17th.
And I've got, and this is going to probably make it worse, Antonio Giovinazzi.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
16th, I've got Kimi.
So I've got George there. I've put him probably out of conventional position, but not too far.
Yeah. And 15th, I've got Antonio Giovinazzi.
Well, if we were going to fill in the blanks, you can probably predict my 15th is Kimi.
Hmm. Um, I the thing is, I think how well Williams do this year will almost have nothing to do with Williams. Weirdly, I think it will be entirely dependent on how well the uprated Ferrari power plant works. Because if Alpha, I mean, they had the lead arguably on Haas last year, and Haas aren't talking about putting practically any development in at all this year at all. But Alpha did still have an advantage over them. And if the power plant is on song and they've reclaimed significant amounts of the power they were down by last year, that could make a heck of a difference in terms of where they might choose to use tokens, how they develop the car, whether they can take the foot off the gas a little bit to put more effort in towards next year without losing relative pace. So it's tricky to work it out. I mean, Williams you'd expect would be on an upswing, but would they choose to use the increased investment towards next year? And this is going to be a running theme, I think, for this video, because this is the problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be the jumping off point. Who's going to kind of abandon this for the new regs and when? And also I was reading up in the kind of researching for this video as well about they've got the two development tokens, because obviously to try and bring the costs down they've added the extra year of the old regs. It's for the most part the same cars. I read somewhere it's basically going to be 60% the same as last year, but they've got two development tokens to kind of work on. And Williams, I believe, have used, well, they can do aero as well outside of those development, I think, as well. I think they can do aero independently. Williams have used one and didn't have the money to use the second, and whether they will is questionable. I agree with you as well about Ferrari. It's about how much that power plant has improved this year. But there's also the fact that we know from the off Haas are not going to, they're not putting anything into this year, barely anything, and the fact that they're not really going to run much testing, aren't going to kind of fire the car up until later than other people, has kind of Williams 2018 vibes to it as well. Now I don't think they'll probably fall that far back, but I just wonder, I mean, this might be more wishful thinking, wanting to see Williams come back up a little bit, but I was thinking, and just to kind of, it feeds into my team's one as well, I think Haas might be last behind Williams, then Alfa Romeo, but thinking about that, it might just literally be like 1 or 2 points. Like Haas maybe pick up a point, Williams pick up 2 or 3. It's those kind of fine sort of small numbers, those margins at the bottom.
At that end of the grid, it is such narrow margins. I mean, we've seen it before where you've had teams at the back had the lead over the team in last place all year, and in the final round of the year lost it because the other team finished 11th or something stupid. So it is really narrow. All you need is one free race and it's all change. So anything could happen, I think, between them two, but I think those two are likely to still be the bottom two teams. I can't see
definitely.
Can't see him moving out of that. Let's say Alpha,
and as you say, Alpha had the edge.
I think they've got the most. I think they've got the most developed driver lineup. Neither of them are exactly what I would describe as rank A1 drivers anymore. Kimi obviously has bags of experience, and on his day is amazing still. But on his day, I mean, he did get beaten by Seb. There's a reason he ended up going back to Alpha. I'm a little bit disappointed with Gio, but I don't think he's a bad driver. It's just that Formula One has an average habit of making good drivers look average. It is supposed to be the best drivers in the world. But he's by no means a terrible driver at all. Head to head against, say, Latifi, for example, I would say he was arguably a better driver, providing he doesn't crash. But again, it's like with Mick Schumacher. Second year, he won his F2 title. Gio in his 1 year in GP2 at the time ran Pierre Gasly close to the title. So that's the kind of level we're looking at. They're title winning, title contending, championship fighting for race winning drivers. But F1 is F1. So I always sort of wait for him to show what he can do and that he deserves to be like in Formula One. But the problem is sort of like there is an argument that being where he's at and running drivers like Kimi Raikkonen, who's obviously been a world champion and has all this experience and stuff as close as he has done, that could be him at his full potential. It's kind of hard to say.
It's a really weird situation at Alfa Romeo because I was not expecting them to have the exact same lineup this season, and clearly maybe that's because they've thought, oh, well, maybe they'll go all change for the new regs in 22. But Kimi, I can't believe he's still going, as he's famously been quoted saying it is just a hobby to him.
But the problem is, it's a hobby he enjoys, and are you going to tell Kimi Raikkonen that you're replacing him if you're Alfa Romeo?
I mean, there's got to be a point. I mean, he's like you say, on his day, he's still good, and but it is on his day. Last year, there was one occasion that popped into mind. He was really good on the opening laps of Portimao. They ended up on the same points last season, Kimi and Gio, and I don't know who that reflects poorly upon, because we've seen it, with George Russell on the grid, you can't use the car as an excuse for not being able to show how good you are, especially also when Charles Leclerc was in the Alfa/Sauber before Gio and also did a really good job there. So I'm with you in that fact that I like him. He's a good driver, and like you say, he's got the junior Formula experience, but I don't think he's quite clicking in F1, and this is his last chance. I did toy with which way round I was going to put Kimi and Gio, because you think, well, okay, Kimi's at a certain level, but is this going to be his last season, and is this going to be kind of the sort of ramping down, and is Gio going to be really pushing it, because actually this is his year to prove, if I want a seat in the new Formula One when it kicks off next season, I need to do something more than I have been doing. I don't think he will quite. I don't know. I don't think he'll quite do it. Whether he gets kept at Alpha for maybe some kind of consistency, so there's like a lead driver coming in, and then maybe another Ferrari Academy driver goes in there. Maybe Ilott moves from his reserve move. Maybe Schumacher moves to Alpha. I don't know, depending on how his season goes. But yeah, it's a weird one at Alpha. I just feel like both of those drivers are. I don't see anything long term in either of them.
No.
Unless Gio really pulls it out this season.
As I say, he's a very good driver, which in F1 makes him average. But with another year's experience under his belt, he could be a driver who could serve as a very good benchmark for someone like Robert Schwartzman or someone if, he wins the F2 championship, and he's sort of like unofficial bookie's favourite at the moment almost. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, yeah.
Right. But the thing is, it's an interesting one with George Russell, because we saw what he could do in the Mercedes, and what happened to him in the Mercedes seems very symptomatic of him. It's just sort of like he looks really, really impressive, and then Latifi nearly finishes ahead of him in the championship. He looked so oppressive against Robert Kubica, and Robert Kubica finished ahead of him in the championship. And it's just like he's in danger of that Nico Hulkenberg thing of being so close but not at the podium. If that makes any sense, it's like it can only take one small thing to turn you from the next up and coming future champion into like that guy who doesn't quite get there. And you almost sort of worry that, the fact that Latifi nearly finished ahead of him in the championship and would have done if George hadn't had that drive in the Mercedes, that and this is a future world champion or a guy touted as being a world champion, and he is that talented. He can be that guy. So it's sort of a bit like, why does it keep kind of slipping away from him? When he's in these potential point scoring positions, how come it's just not happened? And you kind of
Yeah,
wonder, I mean, another year's experience, maybe that will, and the pain last year of like Imola, for example, maybe that will like be what does it, and this year he'll like get the percentage wins, points, whatever else that he hasn't managed to get so far.
yeah. I think with George, it's almost to me, it's kind of like a quirk that Robert Kubica finished ahead of him. He like Robert Kubica got his point in Hockenheim, that mad Hockenheim race of 2018, and you know it could easily have been George at that point,
Yeah,
but the experience I think maybe in just being in the right place at the right time, Kubica managed to get the point that day. Um, the rest of the season, he was just solidly outperforming him. So I don't feel like it's almost like his good results are not flukes. He's got that base level of performance. It's
yeah,
just that
definitely.
he has had some bad luck. Now, Imola was definitely a moment of inexperience, one that hopefully he'll learn from. But other occasions, I think he was very unlucky with the late safety car at Mugello, and was something of a sitting duck at the restart. Um, and then obviously he's one race in the Mercedes. We all know the story of kind of how that went and how that was. He was doing everything right on paper, and
Yeah.
it just was just so unfortunate. So for me, he needs to kind of forget about all the bad luck he's had and just kind of think like, what I'm doing is working to a certain extent. Yes, learn from the mistakes like at Imola, but what I am doing is working. So just keep going, keep pushing the car, keep going, keep, performing. And yeah, okay, he nearly got outscored twice by his teammates, but you've got to look at kind of the extenuating circumstances of, how those races and the things that happened, because there were some really the moments where the grid was just completely thrown upside down, and you know what, he got a bit unlucky with it. But then you look at him as a performer, as for his consistency, and he's got it. Now he does still, I think the big thing is for him to score some points in a Williams this season will be huge for him, because he's proven he can do it in better machinery. But if he can score points in the Williams, I think that will do himself the world of confidence. I think that will silence a few doubters, and I think it will maybe kind of. I mean, I don't know what the situation is with Mercedes as well, with them going forward. Obviously, there's they're both on 1 year contracts, aren't they, Valtteri and Lewis? I think.
Currently, yeah.
Yeah, so depends on how that situation develops. But obviously, if they know how good he is, but if he's able to then score in the Williams and perform consistently, which by putting him 16th, I thought again, and it may only be like 4 World Championship points. I'm not expecting him to like be in even double figures necessarily,
Yeah.
but I think he could do it. Again, that could be me being optimistic, but I think he could do it. It's just he needs to keep focusing on what he's doing right, because for the most part, the things apart from I would say Imola, the things that he's got wrong have unfortunately been out of his control.
I mean, how much of the Mugello thing was perhaps a lack of composure on the restart? I don't know. I mean,
Is yeah,
tyres, I can't remember how much they may or may not have played a part, to be honest. But yeah, it's if you're in that position, you need to try to hold it. I suppose
yeah,
it's
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
he was, and this is the thing as well. He was doing it because I think he had Vettel behind him for most of the race, and he was
yeah,
holding the gap. So
yeah,
like maybe you're right. Maybe it was like a bit of an experience on the restart, and maybe it was a bit of pressure. Because even Vettel came out after the race and said he was unlucky not to. He was keeping us at bay the whole race, and it was just at that safety car restart. So maybe you're right. Maybe that's another element as well.
yeah,
But he's almost there. he can do it, but like you say, if things keep going against him, next Nico Hulkenberg. I don't want to bring this guy up because I talk about him too much already, but maybe the next John Lacey. Just not quite getting
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on the subject, good luck on your mission of, Jean Alesi and getting him his championship.
Thanks very much. It's taken a controversial turn, but I'm going to try and not hit anyone else this season. That's the plan.
Yeah. If you win the championship, people will forget it. It'll be fine.
Well, exactly. It worked for the most part for Schumacher, right? That's fine. It'll be all right. That was in a Benetton, though. I see. Not Ferrari. It was in a Benetton. Don't worry about it. Talking about 94. Forget 97. Nothing happened. Don't worry about it.
I have my own theory, but that's another discussion. Um, right. If you can hear strange noises, by the way, it's just that the dog has decided to wake up and rub itself on the doormat. Now, all I can hear is the dog going. It's really annoying.
Okay, good. I was getting concerned, but that's fine. That's all right. Explained, debunked. It's all right.
Yeah. Moving on to the midfield, I think we
Oh,
offer
dear.
a slight disclaimer about this one, on the grounds that basically I think I've rewritten this about 5 times. I know you were saying you've rewritten it a few times yourself. There is
Yes.
literally scope for every single possible outcome here, because different teams have done different things. Some are developing their cars arguably more than others. Some have already come out and said they're concentrating on next year. Some teams you suspect might want good results because, for like Aston Martin, for example, coming straight back into the sport, you can imagine that them being able to go into next year boasting third place would be quite a thing in their debut season as Aston Martin. Ferrari have said they need a better year than last year. McLaren have a new engine, but fitting that in their car has cost them certain other things, use of tokens and what have you, which I was all planning on talking about after we've gone through this. So let's have a look. I have got next Yuki Tsunoda in 14th.
I've gone for Esteban Ocon.
So I've got him 13th.
And I've got Yuki Tsunoda 13th.
I've got Pierre in 12th.
Also got Pierre.
Cool. I have Lance Stroll in 11th.
Yeah, incredibly, yep. Also got Lance Stroll.
And Lando Norris in 10th.
Yeah, wow, okay, yep. Lando Norris in 10th.
Carlos Sainz in 9th.
So I've got Fernando Alonso there.
I've got him 8th.
And incredibly, Carlos Sainz is my 8th.
So we've got the Spaniards in the same position, just the other way around.
Yeah.
Daniel Ricciardo 7th.
I've got Sebastian Vettel in 7th.
I see. I've got him 6th.
I've got Charles Leclerc in 6th.
And I've got him 5th.
Danny Rick, I'm backing him to match last year and get 5th.
And we were going to leave the other two teams for now.
Oh, yeah.
So, reasons for why you put the drivers you did in the position you did. Other than because it seemed like a good idea at the time.
I mean, that is part of it. It did. And to be fair, going back through them, I can't believe how many we've actually managed to match up. I'm quite surprised by that.
Yeah.
Like you said, a lot of the decision making for me was related to what I could find out about who was using what for their development tokens, who was going to start developing and when.
Yeah.
So for me, I think AlphaTauri they might develop a bit, but I think they were a solid 7th last year. I think they'll probably be there again, because unless we see a few more crazy races like Italy, and we see another Pierre Gasly shock win, I feel like they'll be solid, perform well, but lower parts of the points. I think Tsunoda will do well in his first season. I think Gasly will still have the measure of him just.
Yeah,
Um, but then when we come to Alpine, so they've kind of said they're not developing that much this year at all.
yeah,
Um, I personally don't really rate Esteban Ocon that much. I think he's again fine, but nothing special. He was roundly outperformed last season by Daniel Ricciardo. And I think he will be again by Fernando Alonso. Hence why I've got Ocon 14th and Alonso 9th. So
mm.
that's why I've got the Alpine guys lower down the order for me.
I sort of flirted with that a little bit. The thing I have is Esteban ran Sergio Perez very close when they were teammates. He started the season off a little bit slowly last year, but quite a significant portion of that, as we saw with Giovinazzi previously, could be attributed to the fact he was out for a season as a test driver, and when you're not racing cars, it can make a huge difference. So, towards the tail end of the season, he was getting a lot closer to Ricardo, and obviously this year he's coming into it where he's had more experience of current F1 equipment than Fernando has. So, whereas we know how much of a beast Fernando Alonso is in a car, that might balance the scales a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, maybe ninth is optimistic for me for Alonso, but he certainly feels like he's driving as well as he ever has. He's
Oh
always
yeah,
been great at getting the most out of his machinery.
like
Like you
per
say,
mate.
whether he'll
So
be a little rusty. Well, yeah, yeah, that's a fair point. But yeah, like whether he'll be a bit rusty remains to be seen. Um, I don't know. Maybe I've been a bit harsh on Esteban. I don't know, but I don't. He's got to deliver again this year. I think
yeah,
because yeah, he did kind of start to get some results towards the end of last season. But I think it was kind of the one standout that he had in Sakia. The rest was kind of lower points. So I think, yeah, I think unless again he kind of takes advantage of a crazy race, he'll be kind of lower down the order. But again, he might pleasantly surprise me. Like you say, that's a really good point. You know, he's had a season out, has just gotten back into it, and now he's technically got the advantage in the team. So, you know, maybe you could see the sort of needle between him and Fernando that we saw between him and Sergio, which could be interesting.
oh yeah. I mean, Fernando will not take prisoners in that kind of environment. So
No,
uh,
he's not probably.
every little trick in the book that he can pull up to and including overtaking the driver in front of him going into the pit lane, he will pull. You know, if it'll get him track position and advantage in the team, it's on.
Yeah, he's not what I'd call the easiest of teammates to work with. But then again, isn't that the point? I don't know. Is
He,
that kind of
I,
dichotomy of
well,
being a good teammate?
the thing is, he's a great teammate to have, and you know, he gets on well with his teammates when they understand that they're the second driver. You know, his relationship with, say, Giancarlo Fisichella and Felipe Massa was a much better, happier relationship when he basically already had the advantage.
Yeah, and
So,
there's no guarantee that Esteban will want to kind of relinquish that. But then
no.
again, it depends how much internally Esteban's going to just like. Is he going to be very respectful, or is he going to be like, well, no, I've been in this team longer. I'm the kind of younger upstart, as it were. I mean, I know he's been in for a few years now, but
Yeah.
in relative comparative terms to Fernando Alonso, he's the upstart. So it's how is he going to play it? But obviously, Fernando is going to be going back in the mindset is I'm number one, and maybe not this year, but within a few years, I want to be challenging for a title again. That's
Yeah.
purely going to be his mindset.
Well, he doesn't know how to do anything other than try to be the number one, whether that's in Formula One, it's like going to WEC. He did so with a team who were incredibly dominant, and that helped him very much getting his results he got in there. But I mean, I wonder whether that kind of grew him as a person to working in more of a team environment, being in a car with drivers who you weren't just trying to beat, where you had to like work with them over a 24-hour period to get the best result. Um, it's not entirely the same, but it's a different mindset. So whether he'll take any of that experience back to Formula One with him, because obviously part of the reason he's at Alpine is to help grow them as a team. His experience in championship winning situations and teams, massive experience. He's been with so many, not always necessarily been winning the titles, but Ferrari, McLaren, Renault, Toyota, even the teams in Daytona 24 when he's been partnered and racing in that, they've been established solid teams. So he's carrying a lot of experience with him, just in terms of how to structure, how to build a team, how to make it work, what needs doing, what might need looking at. It's, in terms of focus and where to apply it, there's few people in the sport with more experience than he has at that. So even if the results aren't necessarily 100% what he might want, if he can see stuff behind the scenes moving in a direction he likes, looking forward to next year, for example, he might take a loss this year if he can see forward movement in other areas.
Yeah, and I think he's definitely come back as a project, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
He wants to be able to. I think he likes being the sort of superstar that kind of lifts up a team. Like he's it's the thing that's so often said about him, that he outperforms his cars, which is a kind of a misnomer, because you can't outperform your car, but he gets the maximum out of everything. So if he's able to take, Alpine, Renault from before where they were, back up to the top end, and the main factor is Fernando Alonso was there and helping, that's going to be his focus. And he's been in the game so long now, he's not going to, you'd expect, do a Nigel Mansell and throw his toys out the pram if it doesn't start working instantly. But again, if he is the man that they are building the team around, or they're the one whose experience they're kind of submitting to, how much does that affect Ocon? In terms of, does Ocon now just have to really sit back? Or if he is the future, if Ocon's going to be going well after Alonso, who is Alonso building it for himself, or is he building it for drivers after him to maybe go forward and challenge for championships? That's going to be interesting. I imagine Alonso is going to want to win another world championship before he retires.
Well, I would imagine he would do, but the argument is always that if he's building a successful car that he could win a championship in, then the groundwork would be there that in theory someone else would be able to do so in that car as well. Should Fernando leave, for example. Not that that worked so well at Renault the previous time, but hey.
No.
So, Aston Martin then, because we differ marginally on this. I mean, I had to try and rework them in again, because I'd actually got them originally a lot lower than I put them when we were talking about it, because I sort of forgot that there was serious Mercedes DNA in that car still. I was sort of thinking the rebranding could be a slight distraction, maybe, in taking their eye off the ball a bit. The new driver lineup, how well will Seb get on with the car? Because this year's developments with the reduction in the floor space and whatever else, obviously to reduce downforce, a lot of that is towards the rear of the car, and Seb likes a stable rear end of the car. So how much will that affect him potentially? Or will the car have had being as I said, having quite a bit of Mercedes DNA in it, will the car have a surplus of rear aerodynamics and downforce compared to what he's been driving anyway? So will he not feel, coming from Ferrari, which didn't perhaps have the best last year or a car that suited him, will coming from that car to that one means he notices it less?
This I struggled with Aston Martin as well because I
Yeah.
put them higher and then kind of moved them down because one, I was probably distracted by the Aston Martin branding because I like Aston Martins and I'm becoming an Aston Martin fan, I think. Um,
I do know that it took you some convincing not to spend lots of money on their merchandise.
well, to be fair, the price convinced me not to spend lots of money on their merchandise. I was tempted, and then they said, "Oh, well, this is like 80 quid. This is 300."
Yeah.
Oh great. Well, I'm fine, thank you. And I appreciate them for that. It was really kind of them to do that, so I didn't have to buy anything. It was good, really good of them. So yeah,
Mm.
I I try to separate my potential become. I've never really been a one team Formula One fan. I watched it because of my dad. He supported the British drivers, so I've always supported just whoever the British driver was. So
Uh-huh.
I was just after Mansell. It's always been Hill, then Button, and and then Hamilton and so on. So I'm just starting to kind of break free of that. I still like the British drivers, but at the same time, why limit yourself to just because you happen to be born in the same place?
Well,
I
yeah.
like I like all the drivers on the grid now, bar one, but most of the drivers on the grid,
Yeah.
and I know it's good to root for them as well. So for that reason, I've never followed one team. I've always liked Williams and McLaren. Again, probably because of the British, well, say British roots with McLaren. No, they're technically that's not their origin, but they are very, British
Yeah.
based now.
When
Um,
people associate them, they think, based in the UK, have been since, So even if the original founder wasn't, the team being here for that whole time sort of makes it British just by sort of default almost.
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, with Aston Martin, I kind of feel like, oh well, I've always liked Aston Martin cars ever since I was a boy. It was like everyone says about the cars on your wall.
Yeah.
Still, yeah, DB7, DB5, those are the ones. So great to see Aston Martin in the sport. I'm becoming a fan, but to remove myself from that, I thought, right, yes, there's a lot of Mercedes DNA that will make them quick, but that Mercedes DNA didn't get them past McLaren last season, who now this year also have Mercedes power. Now,
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
whether that will suddenly be the be all and end all because they've had to change the back end to kind of accommodate it, and whether that will actually hamper them, I don't know, because I think they've had to use both their development tokens just being able to fit that Mercedes engine into the McLaren.
Yeah,
So if that's
they've had to change a
all their
lot. Yeah.
focus, yeah, then obviously they're not going to be able to focus on anything else. Is the Mercedes power unit alone going to be better than any other developments they could have made? I don't know. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of Mercedes DNA in the Aston Martin, but then it's a big question about the drivers as well. Like you said, last season Seb did not have a good time. Stroll typically he was seen as having a good season. He had his best season last year. He was still only 11th in the championship. Um, and you think, okay, so their two drivers this year finished 11th and 13th last year. Now, obviously, the guy who finished 13th was having a rough time his last year at Ferrari. He is still a four-time world champion,
Yeah.
but it does depend which version of him shows up this year. If he's kind of in a happier place, a happier space, and he prefers the way this car handles to last year's, great, we might see him back up there. But it
Mm.
depends which one shows up. Then it's also about Lance Stroll. I think he gets has got a lot of unnecessary hate. I feel like the tide is turning on that. He's proved that okay, yep, he's definitely taken advantage of the fact that his father is very much rich, involved in motorsports, has bought the team. But I also think he's proved he's a good enough driver on his own
Yeah.
merit as well. Whether he's good enough to be a team leader and whether those two can get them up to third, I was actually starting to question that, and I second guessed it. Now, don't get me wrong, I want them to do well, but I did the teams as well, and I put them fifth in the teams. And like I said, I had Vettel. I'd Vettel doing better than Stroll. I thought he would do better. Had him seventh, but again, I had Stroll at the same position in 11th because I thought, well, you know what, he'll be good. Will he step up? And I couldn't see it.
I had that weird situation with him where I actually had them sixth originally and then moved them to fourth because of the whole, they're coming from a very solid car last year. They finished last year with probably the third quickest car. I think it's probably accepted they would have had third place in the championship if they hadn't had the points deduction at the start of the year. So, and obviously both drivers having COVID, which didn't help their cause either. So there's so many factors last year where, although they had a great year, it could have even been even better. So you can't imagine, as I said, I mean, this year they've got a few distractions going on and a driver lineup, two drivers that, I mean, we say it with Lance Stroll every year, but they kind of need to almost, Seb says he doesn't, and I believe he's a 4 times world champion. He doesn't feel he does, but there are certainly questions in the media or outside or people who follow Formula One who are asking questions and viewing it as he needs to perhaps show a bit more than he has in the last few years. Which sounds harsh, bearing in mind a couple of years ago he was like the closest person to Hamilton fighting for a title. But the problem is short memories in Formula One, and what people will remember is last season. So,
it was 2018. He was second, wasn't he? He was comfortably second, and then 2019, I think was fifth. I think so. It's kind of the last 2 seasons where it's kind of like, oh, this is the beginning of his kind of way out. So this year, it really does depend how settled he feels and if he can kind of bring back the form that he had just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. If he's comfortable in that car, we'll see a completely revitalised Seb, basically, I think. He's, new home, new environment, people behind him who have invested heavily in him being there. You can understand why he'd be highly motivated to try and make this work. But it's kind of a question if can he, because I genuinely believe he's not looked comfortable in the Formula One car at any point during this hybrid period. 2017, 2018, highly successful years. But a lot of people think that Ferrari was better than they managed to actually get results out of it. And a lot of people in Ferrari apparently behind the scenes were looking at the results Seb was getting and thinking, if Fernando was in that car, and that's always sort of the needle, isn't it? So, but, I mean, no one can ever say Seb is a bad Formula One driver or he's not worthy of a seat because we know how good he can be. But it's, can they build a car which can make him manipulate it the way he wants to? Because Seb, when he's allowed to be fluid and driving like Seb, is a proper force, But Seb, when he's having to readjust how he drives a car, that's a struggle.
Yeah, and also it's the issue that yes, they've spent money on having Seb there to help launch this brand, but at the same time, whose team is it? Who's the number one driver? Because I believe Stroll is listed as the number one technically. I know it's the kind of dynamics yet to really be seen, but who are they going to be focusing on? And that's an argument of, well, who should you focus on? Should you focus on Stroll because he's younger and Seb's there as kind of the older teammate mentor, or should they still be focusing on Seb because he's still got it and he's been a champion before, he could be again?
Well, the fact is,
I don't know, but
Seb's been a team leader. He knows how to get a team to work around him. He knows what he wants in a car. It's just whether they'll develop that in a way he wants. In as much as they're able to, I should imagine they will do, because it's not just in terms of what he can do on a track, but outside it as well. He's a very valuable asset who brings championship winning experience to the team, and I think they'll find that invaluable. So
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's just as it's it's the balancing act between the two of them, though. It's how much input is Lance Stroll going to have in? How much is he going to want to try and, you know, prove himself this year and say, look, I can lead from the front as well?
mm,
It's kind of a similar sort of situation, the dynamic to Alonso and Ocon in that sense, is that, you know, is this kind of the upswing downswing trajectory? Are we kind of seeing, you know, Lance thinks he's doing that and he thinks Seb's doing that? Are they about to meet in the middle? Or,
yeah,
you know, and it will only really get worked out on track. And the thing is, you know, has already had kind of a contentious couple of years with obviously an interesting relationship with Charles on track. I think they got on personally, but obviously it's, you know, that same thing of
yeah,
the young gun coming in.
yeah.
Um, you know, is he about to walk into a similar situation? Um, I personally think he'll have the measure of Lance,
Yeah.
but obviously it's how much is this Lance's team? You know, it's
Lance will have his good days, but he doesn't have enough consistency, I don't think, to be able to take it to his teammate, his more experienced multiple world championship teammate over a season. So,
well, no, and this, you know, like I said, that's kind of been reflected in where I've put them.
yeah,
But you know, you never know. You never know where this is. What's going to happen this season with, you know, how is he going to Stroll going to feel empowered by, like you say, he very nearly had a brilliant result in Turkey. Um, so and now with the fact that obviously it feels like this he's the lead driver, or at least on paper. Yeah, how's that going to change his mindset? Is that going to make him step up? And you know, you don't know how that's going to go, but I do agree with you with that. I think Seb is probably going to come in and, you know, I hope anyway as well, remind people, yeah, you know, he's still got
it
it.
would be good to see. Yeah, right. I've suddenly realised we've been chatting for about 45 minutes already, and we haven't even touched McLaren and yet. So, I mean, we've both put Daniel Ricciardo a couple of spaces ahead of Lando Norris, but would I suggest that's quite simply because how compacted that midfield is going to be, and that on track they're probably not going to be that far apart from each other?
Yeah, I think the issue with that midfield is that they won't all be they'll be separated by a few, not that many points in the grand
Yeah,
scheme of things. So I Norris 10th sounds really harsh, but I don't think he'll be that many points behind.
yeah.
Um,
The problem is however you organise that midfield, there is always someone where you're going to look at that list and think they should be better than that, or they should be higher than that, or I'm doing them bad, you know. But there is no way of organising it where you're not going to end up doing that to someone because it is that competitive.
Absolutely, and you know, I think Lando had a good start to last season, um, and he, you know, I I think he showed lots, but I just think Danny Rick is he's a really good driver. He is another driver that knows how to kind of, you know, get the maximum out of what he's driving, and I think he
Yeah.
will get in and best foot forward, and that experience will carry him forward.
Mm.
I don't necessarily think it will be a bad season for Lando, but I also don't think this is going to be the year where he, you know, has the moment to step into the limelight when a guy like Daniel Ricciardo's come in with. So he's
Yeah.
there again to try and build himself into a title-winning position,
Yeah.
and you know, I don't think Lando Norris can do much to get in the way of that.
this is sort of the problem, is coming into his third season, he sort of needs to be sort of pushing himself as I've got all the experience now, I can do this, I've had my podium, you know, I'm in a position where I can score regular points, I'm showing what I can do. But the problem is the guy in the other car he's past that point. He's an old hand in Formula One terms now. And he has, the reason Renault spent so much money bringing him to them was because, he was someone they saw that could lead them forward into the future. People value what he can add to it. And, McLaren are aware of what they've brought in. And I think Lando's going to struggle against that. He's a supremely, incredibly talented racing driver, but he's not there yet.
No, he isn't. And I think he's progressing well. He showed that he was progressing last season, but he's not at the position to do so this year. And again, part of that's because of the teammate they brought in alongside him. When you bring in someone with that sort of status and experience, there's just not a chance that you can't be thinking, well, Lando Norris is the number one. He's still there to learn, but I think he's bought himself enough time to at least be able to still, as long as he can kind of keep getting those results and try and build on them where he can this season. I don't think Lando's in a bad place, and if he were to finish 10th in the Drivers' Championship, I think obviously his fans would be disappointed that he's not getting a bit further up, but I don't think you could sniff at it. I don't think he'd lose his seat over it.
No, I mean, it's such, as we've said repeatedly, it's such a tight midfield. The different, one DNF can be the difference between you finishing 6th and finishing 10th potentially. It's that close. Which brings us on to Ferrari, pretty much. Now,
okay.
This could go any number of ways, because I've put them being currently third in the Constructors' Championship. I've got Charles in 5th place. I think I had Carlos in about 9th. But again, it's the difference that they are in the table will not be reflective of the points gap between them, really. I think Charles is, in terms of qualifying, it's generally accepted at this point that he is quite special. And I think Carlos, while not being a slouch by any stretch of the imagination, will have trouble measuring up to that. So and in a congested midfield, that can make a lot of difference. And whereas Carlos undoubtedly will go forward during a race, because he's been proved to be very good at that, whether that will be enough to catch up with where Charles will be on track and what he'll be doing, I don't know. This is all very highly dependent on what what this year's car is going to be like. Because, again, it's like what we said with the Haas and with Alfa Romeo. The Ferrari engine this year should be, they hope at least, significantly improved on last year. And if that's the case, bearing in mind that was Ferrari's biggest single weakness last year, don't get me wrong, they had others, but that was that was the one that dropped them so heavily. If that's recovered significantly, then that could be enough to put them into the gap between the top two teams and the chasing midfield. And if you're even a couple of tenths ahead of them, and we saw some of the qualifying performances Charles put in last year with the dog of a Ferrari that was, that could be enough just to keep you clear of the trouble, potentially. So, I mean, if we look at like Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber at Red Bull, Webber was never a slouch when it came to qualifying, but because Seb kept out of trouble and Mark Webber ended up in the battles, that was a large part of the reason why their points gap ended up so far, because he always got mired in fighting other people, whereas Seb could just cut and run. And while obviously it's not going to be quite that when you're in 3rd place, 4th place, 5th place, where you're not quite as fast as the four ahead of you, but you're not, you're perhaps slightly faster than the people behind. That space could be very helpful. So I'm running with that. That's my thinking, but it is heavily reliant on Ferrari having a passably good car, which they might do.
It's very possible. I think I am more positive about Ferrari this year in terms. I definitely think they will have a better power unit,
Mm.
and I think it will fix a lot of their problems. I ended up putting them fourth. I just thought McLaren would still have enough to edge them out overall. Between the experience of Danny Rick, I think he'll get the results to carry them over. Both him and Lando will score well enough, I think, to keep them just ahead. They'll be able to build on last year just enough to hold on to third. But I think it will be tight between them and Ferrari will just come in fourth. I
Yeah.
totally agree that Leclerc will beat Sainz. Um, when he was able to do what he did with that Ferrari last season, I definitely think we're in for better things from this. I think it'll
Yeah.
be a really good fight between him and Ricardo. Personally, I think they will have some good fights
Yeah.
this season. Sainz is, yeah, very capable. I think he'll do all right in the team because, especially in your first season when you don't really have anything to prove. I think he'll
Mm.
throw caution to the wind, and I think he'll get some good results. But he is coming into Charles' team in a sense. He's been there for 2 seasons now. Um, he's got his feet very much under the desk. So, yeah, I think they'll do well together as long as they don't trip over each other. Um,
Mm.
I think they could be a
Yeah.
good partnership, but it depends how much Carlos thinks and is able to take it to Charles. Remembering that, Carlos finished ahead of Charles last season, but again, how much is that down to Ferrari's engine situation
Yeah.
rather than anything else, So it's again going to be an interesting dynamic between them. I think it was a really entertaining move from Ferrari to get Carlos. Whether it doesn't scream define number one, number two to me, but I do think Charles will have the edge. But yeah, really close between them and McLaren is what I would have
Yeah.
thought.
As I said, I've got them third, but it's not like they're a clear third. I've still got them. I still reckon that they'll be kind of at the head of the pack, but only just. So not running away with it. But it does take us up to the top two teams, and we've got basically both their drivers being in the top four of each team. So, who of the top two teams do you have in fourth?
Um, this is probably going to be very unsurprising and original, but I've gone for Sergio Perez.
Yep, that sounds about right to me as well. What about third place then? Because this might be more
Um,
interesting.
well, I really did toy with this one. I'll explain why afterwards, but I've put Max Verstappen in third.
Hmm. I've got Valtteri.
Okay, and you know what, I understand that, but yeah, we'll come back to that. So yeah, I've got Valtteri in second,
Yep, then I've got Max second. And
and
perhaps
then obviously yeah,
unsurprisingly, we've got Lewis claiming his eighth title and becoming like the most successful mathematically, numerically ever. Um, the problem is, what can you say about it? He's over the time got that raw pace down to he's added all round on his game, so he's no longer like just about speed and what have you. His mentality is, whereas it was questionable, say 2011 time, he's got on top of that. He's got consistency into his game. He's learned how to make the tyres work for him. He's still got that raw pace in qualifying. He's a very difficult guy to beat, and that's when he's not in the best car. You know, package that, combine that with the Mercedes, which, they started working on this year's car midway through last season, which is
yeah,
quite scary. Um,
ominous. Yeah,
yeah. So it's, even if they take their foot off the gas and completely all eyes onto 2021 and Red Bull don't, sorry, 2022 and Red Bull don't, I still can't see Max overturning that with all the talent he's got, and he obviously has massive amounts of talent. But if he ran Valtteri close last year for second, I think this year he could do it.
It's going to be close between them, and I did toy between which order to have them in. And my rationale for keeping Max third behind Valtteri is the change of Sergio Perez, that unknown of having a teammate that could run him closer. I think Sergio Perez will comfortably be fourth, but I think he will make things uncomfortable for Max on occasion. We've seen it before where Sergio has had kind of tough working relationships with some of his teammates. You alluded to his time with Ocon before, his season at McLaren with Jenson Button. I remember there were kind of clashes, and I think this is the perfect scenario for it to happen again, because you know him and Max are I think have very similar attitudes in that they want to be at least the best in their team. They are very kind of focused, single-minded. I don't think coming second to their teammate is acceptable to either of them. Now, again, Sergio is very much coming into Max's team. I don't think he'll be able to overturn, but I think he will make it difficult for Max in occasion. And I think when maybe they get involved in fighting each other, maybe not necessarily on track, but when Sergio ends up in positions where actually he's got track position over Max, something that obviously didn't happen last year that much with Alex Albon, but I think could more so. I think that'll drag Max down just enough to allow Valtteri to stay ahead. Valtteri has come back once again saying he is now the most Valtteri Bottas he's ever been before. He is peak Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, but he says that every year.
Exactly.
Valtteri 3.572 megahertz. I don't know.
He's got Wi-Fi. He's got Bluetooth. He's got everything. He's top of the range, Valtteri Bottas this year.
The porridge is special organic porridge. I mean,
no, don't care what coffee he's drinking or what porridge he's eating. Do I think he'll get close to Lewis again? No, I don't think so, because Lewis has just this way of bettering himself even when it feels like there's nothing left he can do. But I think because of that stability within Mercedes, it will allow Valtteri to hold position as second in the championship ahead of Max. So that's right. Why I had them that way round anyway.
I have them that way round for similar-ish reasons, but for Red Bull's lineup this year, see what I said about Ferrari. Because Sergio's qualifying pace is not what he's renowned for. And that tends to be the point where Max kind of pretty much demolishes teammates as a rule. You know, he's very quick on one lap. So I kind of have him starting ahead of Sergio pretty much on every occasion. And while Sergio does tend to have good race pace, it's relentless from Max. And Sergio will certainly be closer. But where I think he'll be about 3, 4, 5 seconds off the back of Max. Just close enough so that Valtteri and Mercedes, or Lewis potentially and Mercedes, won't have the free run they had with strategy the last couple of years. So there's going to be a Red Bull there stopping them from just pitting or doing whatever strategy they want to, and Max having to react to one of them, giving the other Mercedes freedom to do what it likes. You know, having two Red Bulls in the fight and closer reduces the amount of things that Mercedes can play around with, and that I think is going to hurt Valtteri's season, because he's got to Mercedes have got to plan round two of them, not just the one.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and obviously that the strategic side of it has it's not really been a factor for Mercedes for a little bit
No,
now.
well, no, they haven't
So
had to
how
think
they kind
about
of
it.
react to that, well, yeah, how they react to that will be very interesting. But
Mm,
9 times out of 10, yeah, I agree. Valtteri Bottas will probably be the sacrificial lamb.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, it's a very fair point, and it was close between them last season.
yeah.
But yeah, I'm certainly not going to I could see it going either way. I think it's gonna be close between them, whatever way round they finish.
Mm. Right, considering the time now, I think it might be an idea to do our team countdown from 10 to 1. You go first.
So I had Haas in 10th,
I have Haas in 10th,
Williams in ninth,
Williams in ninth,
Alfa Romeo in 8th,
Alfa Romeo in 8th,
Alpha Tauri in 7th.
Alpha Tauri in 7th. Here's where it could get interesting.
Okay, so I've gone Alpine in 6th.
I spoke too soon. Alpine in 6th.
Right, this one I think is definitely. Oh, I don't know now actually. Fifth,
Yeah.
I've gone 4, and it hurts me to say it. Aston Martin.
I've gone for McLaren.
Ah, okay, interesting.
I
I've
think
got
those
Ferrari.
lack of tokens might hurt them.
Well, yeah, and like I say, it very much depends on how much their performance stays consistent from last year, and they are helped by the Mercedes power unit rather than hindered.
Yeah.
Whereas Aston Martin, this was an interesting point I read about them. They have already spent both of their tokens on the survival cell,
Mm.
which is very valid. Good point. Is that going to make them quicker? I don't know. So that's why I've kind of gone Aston Martin fifth. And also the drivers, like I said, last year they didn't have the best
Yeah.
seasons. I think Vettel will do well, but I can't see Stroll getting up high enough to get the results. So yeah, that's why I've gone Aston fifth.
I've gone Aston 4th, but it could go any number of ways.
Yeah. Well, again, the disclaimer, I think this, even though
Yeah.
we've gone like 6th to 3rd, is going to be tight, I think,
Yeah,
regardless.
definitely.
So I've got Ferrari 4th, but
Yeah.
again, really close with who's going to be ahead of them.
I've got them 3rd because more than any other team, they've come out and basically said, we need to do better. But I've heard other people say that they've basically cut this season as a loss already. So the thing is, all teams kind of have to a certain extent. You bring what you race, what you bring. I think might be the thing for this season. So we'll kind of see how it goes. But yes, so I have Ferrari 3rd, and in 2nd, presumably.
Yeah, so I had McLaren 3rd, I had Red Bull 2nd,
Yep, same here. Which leaves Mercedes winning another
Mercedes
championship. Oh
yeah,
dear.
I can't see it. Yeah, can't see any other way, unfortunately. Like
So
when the fact that they've got more power in that engine, and they seem to be really confident about hiding the flaw to kind
yeah,
of recover the downforce that's lost from those rule changes.
yeah.
Yeah, even without DAS, I think it will be a Mercedes.
They've got something going on, and if not, then it'd be difficult to imagine them losing so much from last year that they suddenly would drop that much. Right. Well, considering the time now, I shall. Firstly, would you like to speak about your channel some more and let people know about your continuing mission to, highlight Jean Alesi and, get him to win his championship?
Yeah, so yeah, my channel's called The Outside Line. It is a mix of gaming and real motorsport. So I tell lots of motorsport stories from, years gone by, and then play lots of games from years gone by as well. So at the minute, I'm doing the 1995 season on the original F1 game for PlayStation with Jean Alesi, because I think he deserved more than his one win. Maybe not a championship, but I think we can get him a championship. So it's the season's 10 rounds in now. It's really close, thankfully. So yeah, that's fun. And then I do lots of other motorsport stuff as well. So I've done a bit of Le Mans. Going to go back to that as well at some point. like I say, telling lots of real world stories as well. So I'm going to be doing a video soon on the career of Olivier Panis, who very much might be my next passion project, it seems. So yeah, that's my channel. Nearly a year old now. So but yeah, that's it. But
I
thank
did
you for having
enjoy
me on,
your.
David. I really appreciate it.
No worries. I did enjoy your one on the ZX Spectrum game. That was fun.
Oh, I mean, I remember. It's so much fun. I remember playing it because my dad had the actual Spectrum, and then I found the emulator online. I was like, right, I'm within like a day. I'm like, I'm doing a video on this, and I found another one. There was a game released a year earlier called, I think it was just called Grand Prix. I haven't played. Um, Sorry, my computer screens just went to sleep because it's an interesting story. Yeah, sorry, I found one from a year earlier that I haven't played, so I'll be going back to the Spectrum soon. I have no idea what it's going to be like, but I imagine the graphics will be just as incredible.
Oh wow. I look forward to that one. Alright. Well, I shall say goodbye to you. I shall say goodbye to people watching the video and thank them very much for watching. Obviously, hopefully you subscribe to Ash because it is some of the stuff is unique. As I said, ZX Spectrum can't be beaten.
The original,
And
the best.
oh, absolutely! You've not experienced gameplay until you've loaded a cassette.
Oh, the sound, the sound.
Oh yeah. Showing age a little bit here. Right. So, thank you for watching and take care and good night. Bye bye.